Commander Sarah Chen pressed her palm against the cold, transparasteel window of the spaceport waiting area, watching another transport lift off into the crimson sky of Kepler 442b. The rumble of its engines faded into the thin atmosphere, leaving behind only the steady hum of life support systems and the distant chatter of alien voices echoing through the terminal. 4 days. 4 damn days she had been stranded on this backwater mining colony, waiting for replacement parts for her ship's quantum drive. The Defiant sat in docking bay 7 like a wounded bird, its sleek hull marred by scorch marks from their last encounter with Zephyrian raiders near the Vega system. The cargo hold still contained medical supplies desperately needed on Tau Ceti Prime, where a plague was ravaging the human settlements. Sarah checked her chronometer again. The parts dealer, a slug-like gastropod named Vex, had promised the quantum resonator would arrive today. That was 3 promises ago. Each delay meant more lives lost on Tau Ceti Prime, more families torn apart by the synthetic virus the hegemony had unleashed as a biological weapon. The spaceport buzzed with activity despite the late hour. Traders from a dozen different species haggled over rare minerals extracted from the planet's core. Insectoid klaxons clicked their mandibles in heated discussions about shipping routes. A group of crystalline shard beings chimed musical negotiations over hydrogen fuel contracts. Yet none of them paid attention to the lone human sitting in the corner, her military jacket marking her as just another refugee from the ongoing war. Sarah's stomach growled, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since morning. The food synthesizers in the terminal only produced gastropod nutrient paste, which tasted like recycled plastic and had the texture of wet sand. She had tried it once and decided hunger was preferable. Her emergency rations were back on the ship, and she didn't want to leave the terminal in case Vex finally showed up with her parts. A commotion near the maintenance bays caught her attention. Through the reinforced windows, she could see sparks flying from a massive freighter. The ship belonged to the hegemony, judging by the blood-red insignia painted on its hull. Sarah's jaw tightened. Even here, on a supposedly neutral world, the enemy's presence felt like a weight pressing down on her chest. 3 figures emerged from beneath the freighter. 2 were tall, imposing hegemony soldiers in their characteristic black armor. The third was much smaller, a human in grease-stained coveralls. As they approached the terminal, Sarah could see the mechanic was arguing with the soldiers, gesturing emphatically at a datapad in his hands. The mechanic was middle-aged, with prematurely gray hair and the weathered face of someone who had spent years working with dangerous machinery. His hands were calloused and scarred, and there was an unmistakable tension in his shoulders as he spoke to the hegemony soldiers. Sarah couldn't hear the conversation through the transparasteel, but the mechanic's body language suggested he was being pressed for something he couldn't provide. One of the soldiers grabbed the mechanic's arm, and Sarah instinctively reached for the pulse pistol concealed beneath her jacket. The motion was automatic, born from months of combat against hegemony forces, but she forced herself to remain still. Starting a firefight in a crowded spaceport would endanger innocent civilians and likely get her killed or arrested. The confrontation ended when the mechanic pulled out a credit chip and handed it to the soldiers. They released him and walked away, their heavy boots echoing against the metal floor. The mechanic stood there for a moment, his shoulders sagging with defeat, before heading toward the terminal's main entrance. Sarah watched him enter the waiting area and approach the information desk. The gastropod clerk barely looked up from its terminal as the mechanic spoke in urgent, hushed tones. After a brief exchange, the mechanic's face fell further. He turned away from the desk and slumped into a chair several rows away from Sarah. She studied him more carefully now. Despite his obvious exhaustion, there was something about him that reminded her of the mechanics she had served with in the human colonial fleet. They shared that same combination of technical brilliance and stubborn determination. This man had the look of someone who could fix anything given enough time and parts, but who was currently facing a problem that couldn't be solved with tools. The mechanic pulled out a small hollow projector and activated it. A 3-dimensional image appeared above the device, a little girl, perhaps 6 or 7 years old, with bright eyes and a gap-toothed smile. She was human, and the family resemblance was obvious. The mechanic stared at the image for a long moment before deactivating the projector and burying his face in his hands. Sarah found herself wondering about their story, What had brought a human mechanic and his daughter to this remote mining world? Were they refugees like so many others displaced by the war? Had they been here since before the hegemony expanded into this sector? And why had those soldiers been pressuring him? The questions multiplied, but Sarah forced herself to focus on her own mission. The medical supplies in her cargo hold were worth more than credits. They represented hope for thousands of dying colonists. She couldn't afford to get involved in someone else's problems, no matter how much the mechanic's obvious distress tugged at her conscience. But as she watched him sit alone in the harsh fluorescent lighting of the spaceport, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that their paths were about to intersect in ways she couldn't yet imagine. On the frontier, survival often depended on unexpected alliances and acts of courage that defied logic. She had learned that lesson many times during her years fighting the hegemony's expansion across human space. The chronometer on the wall chimed midnight, marking the beginning of her 5th day on Kepler 442b. Somewhere in the distance, another transport prepared for departure, its engines warming up with a low thrumming that vibrated through the terminal's structure. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to rest, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges and difficult choices that could change everything. Sarah woke to the sound of small footsteps running across the terminal floor. Dawn was breaking over Kepler 442b, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold through the massive viewport. She stretched her stiff neck and looked around the waiting area, noting that most of the overnight travelers had departed on early morning transports. The footsteps belonged to a little girl who was running toward the mechanic from the previous night. She had the same bright eyes Sarah had seen in the hologram, but now they were filled with tears. Her clothes were rumpled, suggesting she had slept in them, and she clutched a worn stuffed animal that looked like some kind of earth creature Sarah couldn't identify. "Daddy," the girl called out as she reached the mechanic, who immediately scooped her up in his arms. "The mean robots came to our house again. They were looking for you." Sarah's blood ran cold. Security drones searching residential areas usually meant the hegemony was cracking down on someone. She moved closer, pretending to read a departure schedule posted on a nearby pillar, but positioning herself where she could overhear their conversation. "It's okay," Emma, the mechanic, whispered, stroking his daughter's hair. "Daddy's going to fix everything." "I promise, gang, but Mrs. Kelleran said they broke our door, and they took your toolbox, the good one with the quantum calibrators." Emma's voice trembled as she spoke. "Why are they so mean to us, Daddy?" The mechanic's face hardened. "Because they think they can take whatever they want from people who can't fight back. But they're wrong about us, sweetheart. We're tougher than they think." Sarah's mind raced as she processed what she was hearing. The hegemony was targeting this man specifically, and they had escalated to searching his home. That usually meant they suspected him of something serious, probably sabotage or espionage. The fact that they had taken his professional tools suggested they were trying to cripple his ability to work. Emma pulled back to look at her father's face. "Are we going to have to leave like the Hendersons did? And the Kowalskis? I don't know yet, baby. But if we do, we'll find somewhere better. Somewhere the bad people can't find us." The mechanic's voice was steady, but Sarah could see the fear in his eyes. He was trying to be strong for his daughter while facing an impossible situation. "Mr. Torres?" A new voice interrupted their conversation. Sarah turned to see a gastropod approaching, its eye stalks focused on the mechanic. This one wore the uniform of Spaceport Administration. "I have message for you from Docking Bay Control." The mechanic, Torres, gently set Emma down and walked over to receive the message. Sarah watched his face go pale as he read the contents of the datapad. His hands shook slightly as he handed it back to the gastropod clerk. "What is problem?" the gastropod asked with genuine concern. "You look distressed." "They're impounding my ship," Torres said quietly, his voice barely audible. "Claimed violations of colonial safety regulations, but it's really because I refused to install their surveillance equipment on customer vessels." Sarah felt a surge of admiration for the man. Installing hegemony surveillance gear was a common demand they made of mechanics and engineers. Most complied rather than face persecution, but Torres had chosen to resist. That took real courage, especially when he had a daughter to protect. The gastropod's eye stalks drooped with sympathy. "This is unfortunate development. Without ship, how will you continue maintenance business?" "I won't," Torres replied, glancing back at Emma, who was trying to feed part of her breakfast to her stuffed animal. "They've made sure of that. No ship, no tools, no way to earn credits." Sarah made a decision that surprised even her. She approached the small group. her military bearing automatically commanding attention. "Excuse me," she said to Torres. I couldn't help overhearing. "Are you Marcus Torres, the freelance mechanic?" Torres looked wary. "Depends who's asking." "Commander Sarah Chen, Human Colonial Fleet." She kept her voice low but allowed some of her natural authority to show through. "I've heard good things about your work from other pilots. They say you're one of the few mechanics who can properly calibrate military-grade quantum drives." "Used to be," Torres said bitterly. "Hard to work on ships when you don't have access to your tools or a workshop." Sarah pretended to consider this. "That's unfortunate. I was hoping you might be able to help me with a problem. My quantum resonator has been giving me trouble and I need someone who really knows their way around drive systems." Torres's eyes narrowed slightly. "What kind of ship?" "Modified Terran frigate. Defiance class. She's in docking bay 7. Sarah paused, letting that information sink in. Military vessels were worth serious money to work on, and Torres would know that. "Daddy, who's the pretty lady?" Emma had approached while they were talking, and she was now looking up at Sarah with curious eyes. Sarah knelt down to Emma's level, her expression softening. "Hi there. I'm Sarah. What's your name?" "Emma Torres. I'm 6 3/4 years old." Emma held up her stuffed animal. "This is Mr. Whiskers. He's a rabbit from Earth, but he can't really talk." "He's very handsome," Sarah said seriously, as if discussing matters of great importance. "Does he help your daddy with his work?" Emma giggled. "No, silly. He's too little to hold tools. But he's very good at keeping me company when daddy has to work late." Sarah looked back up at Torres, who was watching the interaction with a mixture of surprise and caution. "Your daughter seems very smart." "She is. Too smart for her own good sometimes." Torres's voice carried a note of paternal pride despite their circumstances. "The thing is," Sarah continued, standing back up, "I really need that resonator work done quickly. I'm carrying medical supplies to Tau Ceti Prime and people are dying while I'm stuck here. I'd be willing to pay well for fast, quality work." Torres studied her face carefully. "How much are we talking about?" Sarah quoted a figure that made Torres's eyes widen. It was more than most mechanics made in 6 months, and she could see him calculating what that kind of money might mean for his and Emma's future. "There's just one problem," Sarah added. "I'd need the work done on my ship, not in a commercial bay. And I'd need someone I could trust absolutely, someone who's proven they can't be bought by the hegemony." The meaning of her words hung in the air between them. She was offering him more than just a job. She was offering him a way off this world, away from the hegemony forces that were systematically destroying his life. Torres glanced down at Emma, who was humming softly to her stuffed rabbit, then back at Sarah. "When would you need this work completed?" "As soon as possible. Today, if you're up for it." Sarah's tone was matter-of-fact, but her eyes conveyed the urgency of the situation. "And after the work is done?" Torres asked carefully. Sarah smiled, and for the first time since arriving on Kepler 442b, it was genuine. "Well, I suppose that would depend on whether you and Emma might be interested in seeing what Tau Ceti Prime looks like this time of year." 2 hours later, Sarah led Marcus and Emma through the maze of docking bays toward the Defiance. Emma skipped alongside them, her earlier distress forgotten in the excitement of seeing a real military starship. Marcus carried a borrowed toolkit from the Spaceport's emergency supplies. Basic equipment, but enough to work with if he was skilled enough. "Wow," Emma breathed as they rounded the corner and the Defiance came into view. "It's huge!" Sarah couldn't help but smile at the girl's reaction. The ship was indeed impressive, 120 meters of sleek predatory design. Her hull was scarred from battle, but the damage somehow made her look more dangerous rather than diminished. Weapon ports dotted her flanks, and her engine nacelles promised serious speed when properly functional. "She's beautiful," Marcus said softly, his mechanic's eye taking in the ship's lines and proportions. "I've never worked on a Defiance class before, but I've studied the schematics. Whoever designed her really knew what they were doing." "Dr. Elena Vasquez," Sarah replied as she approached the security scanner. "Brilliant engineer. She died defending the Proxima Centauri shipyards 3 years ago." The scanner confirmed her identity with a soft chime, and the airlock began its cycling sequence. As they stepped aboard, Emma's eyes went wide. The interior of the Defiance was a study in military efficiency. Every surface served a purpose. Every component was designed for reliability under extreme conditions. The corridors were wide enough for emergency equipment transport, but narrow enough to be defensible if boarded. "The quantum drive is this way," Sarah said, leading them toward the engineering section. "I should warn you. The resonator isn't just malfunctioning, it's been deliberately sabotaged. The hegemony hit us with some kind of harmonic weapon during our last engagement. It didn't destroy the component, but it left it unstable." Marcus nodded grimly. "Harmonic weapons are nasty. They're designed to create cascading failures in quantum containment systems. If the resonator had completely collapsed, it would have taken half your ship with it. Which is why I need someone who really understands the technology," Sarah replied. "A regular mechanic might be able to make it work temporarily, but I need it fixed properly. We can't afford to have it fail in deep space." They entered the engineering bay and Marcus let out a low whistle. The quantum drive was a masterpiece of human engineering, a fusion of theoretical physics and practical technology that allowed faster-than-light travel. But Sarah could see the damage immediately. The primary resonator housing showed signs of stress fractures, and several monitoring displays showed readings in the red zone. "Emma, sweetie, why don't you sit over here while Daddy works?" Marcus guided his daughter to a safe spot near the entrance. "And don't touch anything, okay? This is very dangerous equipment." "Okay, Daddy, can Mr. Whiskers watch you work?" Emma settled down with her stuffed rabbit, content to observe from a distance. Marcus began his examination of the damaged systems, his hands moving with the confident precision of someone who had worked with quantum technology for years. Sarah watched him probe the resonator housing with specialized sensors, his face growing more serious as he discovered the extent of the damage. "This is worse than I thought," he said after several minutes. "The harmonic attack didn't just destabilize the resonator, it created microfractures throughout the entire containment matrix. If you had tried to jump to faster-than-light speeds with this damage, the quantum field would have collapsed catastrophically." "How catastrophically?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she didn't want to know the answer. "The kind where your ship gets turned into exotic particles and scattered across several light years," Marcus replied bluntly. Whoever designed that weapon knew exactly what they were doing. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The hegemony's weapons technology was advancing faster than human defensive capabilities could match. "Can you fix it?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying readouts on his scanner. "Yes, but it's going to take time. I'll need to completely rebuild the containment matrix from scratch, and I'll need parts that aren't available on this world." "What kind of parts?" "Quantum-grade crystalline matrices, exotic matter containment vessels, temporal stabilization circuits." Marcus shook his head. "The nearest place to get components like that would be the Vega system, and that's controlled by the hegemony now." Sarah's heart sank. Without those parts, the Defiance would remain grounded, and the medical supplies in her cargo hold would never reach Tau Ceti Prime. Thousands of people would die while she sat helplessly on this backwater world. "However," Marcus continued, "I might be able to jury-rig a solution using components from other ships. It wouldn't be as elegant as a proper repair, but it would get you where you need to go." "What do you need?" Sarah asked immediately. "Navigation computers from 3 different ship classes, power converters from a heavy transport, and quantum field generators from at least 2 light freighters." Marcus looked apologetic. "It's a lot of equipment, and most ship owners won't part with essential components." Sarah thought for a moment, then smiled grimly. "Leave that to me. There's a hegemony freighter in Bay 12 that's been sitting there for 2 days. I think they owe humanity some compensation for all the suffering they've caused." Marcus's eyes widened. "You're talking about stealing from the hegemony? That's incredibly dangerous. If they catch us..." "Well, they won't catch us," Sarah interrupted. "I've been studying their security patterns since I arrived. They're overconfident and lazy. Besides, that ship is loaded with supplies they stole from human colonies. We'd just be taking back what they stole in the first place." "But what about Emma?" Marcus glanced at his daughter, who was quietly playing with her stuffed rabbit. "I can't put her in danger." Sarah's expression softened. "Emma will stay here safe on the Defiance. The ship's security systems are military grade and she'll be protected. You and I will handle the supply run." "I don't like leaving her alone," Marcus said uncertainly. "Daddy?" Emma looked up from her game. "Are you and Sarah going to go get the parts to fix the ship?" "Maybe, sweetheart. But I don't want to leave you by yourself." Emma considered this seriously. "I'll be okay, Daddy. Sarah's ship seems very safe and Mr. Whiskers will keep me company. Besides, you always taught me that sometimes grown-ups have to do difficult things to help other people." Marcus stared at his daughter, clearly torn between pride and concern. "When did you get so wise?" "I was born wise," Emma replied matter-of-factly. "Mrs. Kelleran says I'm an old soul in a little body." Sarah felt something twist in her chest at the girl's words. There was something heartbreaking about a child having to be so mature, so understanding of danger and sacrifice. It reminded her of all the young people she had seen forced to grow up too quickly because of the war. "All right," Marcus said finally, "but we do this carefully. No unnecessary risks." "Agreed," Sarah replied. "We get in, take what we need, and get out. The hegemony will never know what hit them." As they began planning their infiltration of the enemy ship, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this mission was about more than just fixing her quantum drive. She was giving Marcus and Emma a chance at a new life, free from hegemony persecution, and perhaps in some small way, she was striking back against the forces that had taken so much from humanity. Emma settled back with her stuffed rabbit, humming a soft melody while the adults planned their dangerous mission. In her innocent confidence, she represented everything the human race was fighting to protect: hope, resilience, and the belief that tomorrow could be better than today. The hegemony freighter Domination squatted in docking bay 12 like a mechanical predator. Its dark hull absorbed the artificial lighting, making it seem to exist in its own pool of shadow. Sarah and Marcus crouched behind a stack of shipping containers, studying the ship's external security measures. "Two guards at the main airlock," Sarah whispered, pointing to the armored figures standing at attention near the ship's primary entrance. "Automated turrets on the dorsal hull, but they're designed for ship-to-ship combat, not anti-personnel work. We should be able to stay below their tracking angle." Marcus adjusted his borrowed scanner, trying to map the freighter's internal systems. "I'm reading multiple power signatures inside. The components we need are there, but they're distributed throughout the ship. Navigation computers in the bridge section, power converters in the engineering bay, quantum generators in the cargo hold." "How long will it take you to extract what we need?" Sarah checked her chronometer. The guards change shifts every 4 hours, and they had been watching for 90 minutes. Depends on how the components are integrated. If they're modular, maybe 20 minutes. If they're hardwired into the ship's systems? Marcus shrugged. Could take an hour or more, Sarah frowned. An hour was too long to spend inside an enemy vessel. There were too many variables, too many things that could go wrong. Is there a way to speed up the process? Not without specialized extraction tools. And those were in my workshop before the hegemony confiscated everything. Marcus's voice carried a note of bitter frustration. A new voice interrupted their planning. "Excuse me, but did you say you needed extraction tools?" Both humans spun around to find themselves facing a small crystalline creature no taller than Emma. Its faceted body caught and reflected the docking bay lights, creating tiny rainbows across its surface. This was a shard being, one of the silicon-based species that had remained neutral in the war between humanity and the hegemony. "Who's asking?" Sarah's hand moved instinctively toward her concealed weapon. "My designation is Prism of Truth and Starlight," the creature said, its voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "I could not help but observe your reconnaissance of the hegemony vessel. Your intentions appear aligned with justice." Marcus looked confused. "What do you mean?" "The crew of that ship committed crimes against my people 3 cycles ago. They stole a shipment of processed crystals from our mining operation in the Vega system. When we protested, they destroyed our transport and left 17 of my kindred floating in space." Prism's crystalline structure darkened with emotion. "We have been waiting for an opportunity to recover what was stolen." Sarah studied the alien carefully. Shard beings were known for their honesty. It was biologically impossible for them to lie due to the way their crystalline matrices processed information. If Prism was telling the truth, then they had a potential ally. "You're suggesting we work together?" Sarah asked. "I am suggesting that your needs and mine may be complementary. You require rapid extraction of technological components. I require recovery of stolen property. The ship contains both." Prism's structure brightened slightly. "Additionally, I possess molecular disintegration tools that can separate components from their mounting systems without damage." Marcus's eyes lit up. "Molecular disintegrators would cut our extraction time to minutes instead of hours. What do you want in return?" Sarah asked. Experience had taught her to be suspicious of offers that seemed too good to be true. "Safe passage off this world," Prism replied immediately. "The hegemony has issued warrants for my arrest. They claim I am a terrorist, but I simply refuse to accept their authority over my people's sovereign territory. Sarah considered the proposal. Taking on an alien passenger would complicate their escape, but having those extraction tools would make their mission much more feasible. How do we know you won't betray us to the hegemony? Prism's structure flashed briefly, the shard being equivalent of laughter. Commander Chen, my people have been fighting the hegemony's expansion for decades. We have no love for their empire of oppression. Besides, betraying you would require deception, which is impossible for my species. Assuming we agree, Marcus said carefully. How do you propose we get aboard that ship? The ventilation systems, Prism replied. My natural form allows me to navigate spaces too small for humanoid beings. I can disable the internal security sensors from within the ship's infrastructure, creating a window for your infiltration. Sarah looked at Marcus, who nodded slowly. It could work. If Prism can take out the internal sensors, we could enter through the service hatch on the ship's underside. The guards wouldn't see us coming. Very well, Sarah decided. But we do this my way. Military precision, minimal violence unless absolutely necessary. We get in, take what we need, and get out clean. Agreed, Prism chimed. When shall we begin? Guard change is in 40 minutes, Sarah replied. That gives us a 30-second window when the relief guards are still adjusting to their posts. Prism infiltrates first, disables the sensors, then signals us to move. They spent the next half hour refining their plan. Prism would enter through a maintenance port near the freighter's atmospheric processing unit. Once inside, the shard being would make its way to the security control room and temporarily disable the internal monitoring systems. Sarah and Marcus would then have approximately 10 minutes to enter the ship, extract the needed components, and escape before the sensors automatically reset. Remember, Sarah emphasized, we're not heroes trying to save the galaxy. We're thieves stealing what we need to survive. Get in, get what we came for, and get out. No unnecessary risks. As the time approached, Sarah found herself thinking about Emma, safely secured aboard the Defiance. The little girl was depending on them to succeed, to find a way off this world before the hegemony decided to escalate their persecution of her father. That thought strengthened Sarah's resolve. She had failed to save too many people during this war, but she would not fail Emma. The guard change happened exactly on schedule. 2 fresh soldiers marched up to relieve their colleagues, spending precious seconds exchanging duty reports and status updates. During that brief moment of divided attention, Prism flowed like liquid light across the open space between the shipping containers and the freighter's hull. Sarah watched through, her scope as the shard being seemed to melt through the maintenance port's molecular barriers. For several tense minutes, nothing happened. Then a tiny pulse of light flickered from one of the freighter's sensor arrays. Prism's signal that the internal surveillance was down. Let's go, Sarah whispered. They sprinted across the open docking bay, their footsteps muffled by the sound dampeners built into their boots. The service hatch was exactly where Marcus had indicated, hidden beneath the freighter's primary engine cowling. Sarah's military access codes, modified by some creative electronic engineering, convinced the lock that she was an authorized technician. The airlock cycled with agonizing slowness, but finally they were inside the enemy ship. The corridor beyond was dimly lit and empty, exactly what they had hoped for. Prism appeared beside them like a materialization of living crystal, its structure pulsing with urgency. Components located, the alien whispered. Navigation systems 2 levels up, power converters 3 levels down, quantum generators in forward cargo bay. Internal patrol routes identified. We have 8 minutes remaining before sensor reset. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. 8 minutes to steal enough equipment to repair a military starship. It should have been impossible, but she had learned that impossible was just another word for things that hadn't been done yet. Move, she ordered, and they split up to begin the most crucial theft of their lives. The corridors of the Domination hummed with malevolent energy. Emergency lighting cast everything in shades of red, making the ship feel like the inside of some mechanical beast. Sarah moved through the passages with practiced stealth, her military training allowing her to avoid the automated patrols that Prism had warned them about. She reached the bridge level and quickly located the navigation systems. The quantum processors were housed in sleek black cabinets marked with hegemony insignia. Sarah's jaw tightened as she recognized some of the components. They were human-made. almost certainly stolen from captured ships or destroyed colonies. Working quickly, she began disconnecting the primary navigation computer. The molecular disintegrator that Prism had provided made the work surprisingly easy. Instead of spending precious minutes on soldering connections and bypassing security locks, she could simply dissolve the mounting brackets and lift out entire assemblies. 2 levels below, Marcus was having similar success with the power converters. The engineering bay was larger than he had expected, filled with massive generators and energy distribution systems. The converters he needed were clearly labeled, and the hegemony's modular design philosophy meant they could be removed without damaging the surrounding equipment. "This is almost too easy," Marcus muttered as he extracted the 3rd converter. The molecular disintegrator worked like magic, cleanly separating components without leaving any trace of sabotage. Meanwhile, Prism was in the forward cargo bay, working on the quantum field generators. The shard being's crystalline structure allowed it to interface directly with the ship's systems, bypassing electronic locks through pure molecular manipulation. But as it worked, Prism discovered something that made its faceted form darken with anger. The cargo bay contained more than just stolen technology. Stacked in neat rows were crystalline formations that Prism recognized immediately, the processed star crystals that had been stolen from its people. But worse than the theft was what the hegemony had done to the crystals. They had been carved and shaped into decorative objects, turning sacred artifacts into mere ornaments for hegemony officers. "Blasphemy," Prism whispered, its harmonic voice carrying pain that transcended species barriers. These crystals were not just valuable minerals. They were the crystallized memories of shard-being ancestors, containing centuries of accumulated wisdom and experience. But there was no time for grief. Prism forced itself to focus on the mission, extracting the quantum generators with mechanical precision, while its people's stolen heritage watched in silent accusation. Sarah was making her way back to the rendezvous point when she heard voices approaching. 2 hegemony soldiers were walking down the corridor, discussing their upcoming shore leave. She pressed herself against the wall, grateful for the red lighting that helped conceal her presence. "Can't wait to get off this dump of a planet," one soldier was saying. "Nothing but rocks and aliens here." "At least it's better than garrison duty," his companion replied. "Did you hear about the sweep they're planning for tomorrow? Command wants every human on this world questioned about the resistance cell." Sarah's blood ran cold. A planetary sweep meant the hegemony was planning to round up every human civilian for interrogation. Marcus and Emma would be priority targets, especially given Marcus's recent troubles with the authorities. The soldiers passed by without noticing her, but their conversation had added new urgency to the mission. They needed to get off Kepler 442b tonight, not just for the sake of the medical supplies, but for their own survival. She reached the rendezvous point to find Marcus already waiting with his recovered components. The power converters were compact but heavy, designed for the demanding energy requirements of military-grade quantum drives. "Any problems?" Sarah asked as she set down her burden. "None. Those molecular disintegrators are incredible." Marcus checked his chronometer. "We still have 3 minutes before the sensors reset." "Where's Prism?" As if summoned by his question. The shard being appeared carrying the quantum generators and several other objects that glinted in the red light. Sarah realized they were the carved crystals from the cargo bay. "I could not leave them," Prism said simply. "They are the memories of my ancestors. To abandon them would be to abandon my heritage." Sarah understood. She had seen enough war to know that some things were worth any risk to preserve. "Can you carry all of that?" "I will manage," Prism replied, its structure brightening with determination. They made their way back to the service hatch, moving as quickly as silence would allow. The stolen components represented everything they needed to repair the Defiance, but they would be worthless if they were caught before reaching safety. The airlock cycled them back into the docking bay just as the freighter's sensors began their restart sequence. Sarah led them in a sprint across the open space, expecting at any moment to hear shouts of alarm or the whine of energy weapons. But their luck held. They reached the cover of the shipping containers without being detected, and from there it was a relatively simple matter to make their way back to Docking Bay 7. Emma was waiting for them aboard the Defiance, curled up in the pilot's chair with Mr. Whiskers clutched tightly in her arms. She had fallen asleep during their absence but woke immediately when they entered the bridge. "Daddy," she exclaimed, scrambling down from the chair to hug Marcus. "Did you get everything you needed?" "We did, sweetheart," Marcus replied, holding her close. "And we made a new friend, too." Emma looked curiously at Prism, her 6-year-old mind taking the alien's presence in stride. "Hello, are you made of diamonds?" Prism's structure flickered with amusement. "I am made of something similar, young one. My name is Prism of Truth in Starlight, but you may call me Prism. I'm Emma. And this is Mr. Whiskers. He's very pleased to meet you." Emma held up her stuffed rabbit, and Prism gravely acknowledged the introduction. "We need to work fast," Sarah interrupted, though she couldn't help smiling at the exchange. "I overheard some hegemony soldiers talking about a planetary sweep tomorrow. They're planning to question every human on this world." Marcus's face went pale. "That means they'll come for Emma and me specifically. We're already on their watch list." "Which is why we're leaving tonight," Sarah replied firmly. "How long will it take you to install those components?" Marcus looked at the stolen equipment, his engineer's mind already working through the installation sequence. 4 hours, maybe 5 if I run into complications. But I'll need to completely shut down the quantum drive while I work. The ship will be vulnerable. "I'll handle security," Sarah said. "Prism, can you help Marcus with the technical work?" "I would be honored to assist," Prism replied. "My people are skilled in quantum field manipulation." As they began the complex task of repairing the Defiance, Sarah felt a familiar weight settling on her shoulders. Once again, she was responsible for protecting innocent people from the hegemony's cruelty. But this time felt different. This time, she wasn't fighting a distant war against faceless enemies. She was fighting for a little girl who had already lost too much, for a father trying to build a better life for his daughter, and for an alien whose people had suffered similar losses. Emma settled back into the pilot's chair, watching the adults work with fascination. "Sarah?" she said quietly. "Yes, Emma. When we go to the place with the sick people, will we be able to help them get better?" Sarah paused in her work to look at the little girl. "Yes, Emma, we're going to help them get better." "Good," Emma said with satisfaction. "Mr. Whiskers thinks helping people is the most important thing in the universe." Looking at Emma's earnest face, Sarah realized that the stuffed rabbit was absolutely right. The repairs took longer than expected. What should have been a 4-hour job stretched into 6 as Marcus discovered additional damage to the quantum field stabilizers. Sarah paced the corridors of the Defiance, checking security sensors and monitoring Spaceport communications for any sign that their theft had been discovered. Emma had appointed herself as the official assistant, carrying tools and offering encouragement. She seemed fascinated by Prism, who had proven remarkably skilled at quantum field manipulation. The shard being's crystalline structure could interface directly with the ship's systems in ways that amazed even Marcus. "How do you do that?" Emma asked as she watched Prism's faceted hands merge temporarily with a control panel, adjusting the quantum field harmonics with impossible precision. "My people are creatures of living crystal," Prism explained patiently. "We can reshape our molecular structure to match other crystalline matrices. It is how we communicate with our starships and technology." "That's so cool. Can you teach me?" Prism's structure brightened with amusement. "I fear that is not possible, young Emma. Your biology is carbon-based, while mine is silicon-based. We are quite different in our fundamental nature. But we're still friends, right?" Emma's voice carried a note of concern. "Of course," Prism replied warmly. "Friendship transcends molecular differences." Marcus looked up from his work on the quantum resonator housing. "Field alignment is looking good. I think we can start the preliminary tests." Sarah felt a surge of relief. They were finally making real progress. "How much longer?" "Another hour for final calibration, then we can attempt a low-power startup." Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead. "If everything holds together, we should be able to make the jump to faster-than-light speeds." A soft chime from the bridge interrupted their work. Sarah immediately recognized the sound, an incoming priority communication. She hurried to the command center, followed by the others. The main screen displayed the concerned face of Captain Reynolds, Sarah's commanding officer in the human colonial fleet. His image was encrypted and transmitted through a secure quantum entanglement channel, making interception virtually impossible. "Commander Chen." "Thank God," Reynolds said as soon as Sarah appeared on screen. "We've been trying to reach you for hours. What's your status?" "Repairs in progress, sir. We should be ready to depart within the hour." Sarah kept her voice professional, though she was aware of Marcus, Emma, and Prism listening behind her. That's good news, because the situation on Tau Ceti Prime has deteriorated rapidly. The plague is spreading faster than our medical teams can contain it. We've lost 3 more colonies in the past day. Reynolds looked exhausted, as if he had been awake for days. Those medical supplies you're carrying may be the difference between saving the system and losing it entirely. Sarah's chest tightened. Understood, sir. We won't let you down. There's something else, Reynolds continued, his expression growing even more serious. Intelligence reports indicate that the hegemony is planning a major offensive in the Tau Ceti system. They want to claim the planets while our defenses are weakened by the plague. You may be flying into a war zone. How long until the offensive begins? Sarah asked. 72 hours, maybe less. The medical supplies need to reach the surface and be distributed before the hegemony fleet arrives. Reynolds paused, studying something off-screen. I'm also sending you updated navigation data. There are hegemony patrol ships along the standard routes. You'll need to use the deep space passages through the Void Nebula. Sarah nodded grimly. The Void Nebula was a region of space notorious for its navigation hazards and sensor interference. Ships had been known to disappear completely in its swirling clouds of exotic matter, but it would also conceal their approach from hegemony sensors. One more thing, Commander, Reynolds added. Intelligence suggests the hegemony has developed new weapons specifically designed to counter our quantum drive technology. If they detect you, don't try to outrun them. Find cover and wait for support. Acknowledged, sir. Chen out. The communication ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Sarah turned to find 3 pairs of eyes, 2 human and 1 crystalline, watching her with varying degrees of concern. The sick people are in even more trouble than we thought, Emma said quietly. It wasn't a question. Yes, Sarah replied honestly. She had learned that children often handle difficult truths better than the comforting lies adults preferred to tell them. But we're still going to help them. Marcus stepped forward. Commander, maybe Emma and I should find another ship. You'll be flying into combat, and that's no place for a child. With respect, Mr. Torres, there are no other ships. Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. The hegemony sweep starts in a few hours. If you stay here, you'll be arrested or worse. At least with us, you have a chance. Emma tugged on her father's sleeve. Daddy, we should go with Sarah. The sick people need the medicine, and Mr. Whiskers says we should always help people when they're in trouble. Marcus looked down at his daughter, then at Sarah. What exactly would we be walking into? A plague-ravaged star system under threat of military invasion, Sarah replied bluntly. But also a place where your skills would be desperately needed. The colonies always need good engineers, especially ones with your expertise in quantum systems. Prism stepped forward, its crystalline structure pulsing with determination. My people have a saying, the brightest crystal is forged in the deepest darkness. Perhaps this crisis is an opportunity to create something better. Besides, Emma added with the wisdom that seemed to come naturally to her, running away from bad things doesn't make them go away. Sometimes you have to face them to make them stop. Marcus stared at his daughter for a long moment, then smiled. When did you get so smart, little one? I told you I was born that way, Emma replied matter-of-factly. A new alarm chimed from the engineering section. The quantum drive was ready for testing. Marcus hurried back to his makeshift workshop, with the others following close behind. The repaired resonator hummed with contained energy, its crystalline structure glowing with the soft blue light of properly aligned quantum fields. Initiating low-power test, Marcus announced, his hands dancing over the control interface. Field stability looking good. Resonance frequency nominal. Containment matrix holding steady. The ship seemed to shiver slightly as the quantum drive came online. For a moment, Sarah held her breath, waiting for the catastrophic failure that would leave them stranded forever. But the systems held, and the drive settled into the steady harmonic rhythm that meant successful operation. We have faster-than-light capability, Marcus announced with quiet pride. She's not pretty, but she'll get us where we need to go. Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. They finally had a way off this world, a chance to complete their mission and save thousands of lives. But as she looked at Emma, innocent, trusting, and ready to face unknown dangers to help strangers, she realized that somewhere along the way, their mission had become about more than just delivering medical supplies. They were carrying hope itself into the darkness, and that was a cargo more precious than any medicine. Prepare for departure, Sarah ordered. We launch in 30 minutes. Emma clapped her hands together excitedly. We're really going to help the sick people. Yes, we are, Sarah replied, and for the first time in months she felt genuinely optimistic about their chances of success. After all, they had already overcome impossible odds just to get this far. What was one more impossibility between friends? The Defiance lifted off from Kepler 442b, just as the first security sweeps began in the residential sectors. Through the bridge viewport, Sarah could see the harsh lights of hegemony search teams moving through the colony, like mechanical spiders hunting for prey. They had escaped with mere minutes to spare. Emma pressed her face against the transparasteel, watching the planet shrink behind them. Goodbye, mean planet, she whispered to Mr. Whiskers. I hope the people who are left find somewhere better to live. The transition to faster-than-light speed went smoothly, Marcus's improvised repairs holding steady as they jumped into the swirling chaos of hyperspace. The stars elongated into streams of light, and the familiar sensation of quantum displacement settled over the crew. Jump successful, Sarah announced. Estimated travel time to Tau Ceti Prime, 18 hours through the Void Nebula route. 18 hours? Marcus looked concerned. That's cutting it close. The hegemony offensive begins in less than 3 days. It'll have to be enough, Sarah replied. The alternative routes would take us right through hegemony patrol zones. As they settled into the long journey ahead, Sarah found herself reflecting on the strange chain of events that had brought them together. 3 days ago, she had been a solo pilot focused only on her mission. Now she was responsible for a makeshift family fleeing persecution and an alien refugee seeking justice for its people. Emma had claimed the navigator's station as her own, setting up an elaborate tea party for Mr. Whiskers and several spare circuit boards that she had convinced Marcus to let her borrow. Prism sat nearby, its crystalline structure resonating softly with the ship's quantum harmonics as it meditated in the way of its people. Sarah? Emma looked up from her game. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why are the hegemony people so mean? Don't they have families too? Sarah paused, considering how to explain the complexities of war to a 6-year-old. I think they've forgotten what it means to be kind. When people become too focused on power and control, they sometimes lose sight of what really matters. Like helping people who are sick? Exactly like that. Emma nodded solemnly, then brightened. Well, when we get to the sick people's planet, we'll show them how to be kind again. I think you're right, Sarah said, marveling at the child's unwavering optimism. 12 hours into their journey, they encountered their first major challenge. The navigation sensors detected an anomaly ahead, a massive debris field floating in the void between star systems. The wreckage appeared to be the remains of several ships, both human and alien, scattered across thousands of cubic kilometers of space. It's a graveyard, Marcus said quietly, studying the sensor readings. Looks like there was a major battle here recently. Prism's structure darkened as it examined the data. I recognize some of those ship designs. They belong to refugee convoys, civilian vessels carrying families fleeing the war. Sarah felt sick. The hegemony had been targeting refugee ships, attacking defenseless civilians trying to escape the conflict. It was a violation of every treaty and convention governing interstellar warfare. Can we go around? Marcus asked. Not without adding 6 hours to our journey, Sarah replied. And the debris field is too large to avoid completely. We'll have to navigate through it. As they entered the graveyard, the scope of the tragedy became apparent. Hundreds of ships floated dead in space, their hulls torn open by energy weapons and explosive decompression. Personal belongings drifted among the wreckage, children's toys, family photographs, keepsakes from abandoned homeworlds. Emma pressed closer to the viewport, her young face struggling to comprehend what she was seeing. Are there people in those ships? No, sweetheart, Sarah said gently. This happened a long time ago. The people are gone. Gone where? Emma's voice was very small. Sarah exchanged a look with Marcus, who nodded slightly. They died, Emma. The bad people hurt them very badly. Emma was quiet for a long moment, then hugged Mr. Whiskers tighter. That's why we have to help the sick people, isn't it? So the bad people don't hurt them too. Yes, Sarah replied, her voice thick with emotion. That's exactly why. They navigated through the debris field in respectful silence, each lost in their own thoughts about the lives that had been lost here. but as they neared the far edge of the graveyard, their sensors detected something unexpected, a faint distress signal coming from one of the larger wrecks. "That's impossible," Marcus said, checking the readings. "These ships have been here for months. Nothing could have survived that long." But Prism's crystalline structure was pulsing with excitement. "That signal pattern, it's not from a life support system. It's from a quantum storage matrix. Someone managed to preserve their consciousness before their ship was destroyed." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Quantum consciousness storage was theoretical technology, something that existed only in research laboratories. If someone had actually managed to preserve a living mind in quantum form, "We have to investigate," she decided. "Emma, I need you to stay with Prism while your father and I check out that wreck." "Can I come too?" Emma asked hopefully. "Not this time, sweetheart. It might be dangerous, and Mr. Whiskers needs someone to keep him company." Emma considered this seriously, then nodded. "Okay, but promise you'll be careful." "I promise." The wreck turned out to be a research vessel from the University of New Geneva. Its hull was split open like a broken egg, but the quantum laboratory at its core was still intact, protected by emergency force fields that had somehow maintained power for months. Inside the lab, they found the source of the signal, a crystalline matrix containing the preserved consciousness of Dr. Elena Vasquez, the same brilliant engineer who had designed the Defiance-class starships. "Commander Chen?" Dr. Vasquez's voice emerged from the quantum matrix, weak but unmistakably alive. "Thank God someone finally heard our distress call. Dr. Vasquez, we thought you died at Proxima Centauri 3 years ago." "My body did," the scientist replied with remarkable composure. "But I managed to upload my consciousness to this matrix before our ship was destroyed. I've been waiting here, hoping someone would find us." "Us?" Marcus looked around the ruined laboratory. "My research team. 17 of the galaxy's best scientists, all preserved in quantum storage. We were working on a cure for the hegemony's biological weapons when they attacked us." Dr. Vasquez's voice grew stronger as her matrix adapted to their communication systems. "Commander, we have the cure you need. The complete formula for neutralizing the plague affecting Tau Ceti Prime." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. "You have a cure?" "Not just a cure, a vaccine that can prevent future outbreaks. The hegemony's plague is designed to target specific genetic markers in human DNA. Our research found a way to block those markers completely." Marcus was already working to extract the quantum storage matrices from the wreckage. "How long will it take to synthesize the cure?" "With proper laboratory facilities, perhaps 6 hours," Dr. Vasquez replied. "But Commander, there's something else you need to know. The hegemony is planning to deploy an even more deadly version of the plague, one that will affect all carbon-based life forms, not just humans." Sarah felt cold dread wash over her. "When?" "Soon. The weapon is aboard their flagship, the Absolute Authority. They plan to test it on Tau Ceti Prime before deploying it across the galaxy." The implications were staggering. The hegemony wasn't just trying to win a war. They were planning genocide on an interstellar scale. "Every living world would be at risk. We have to stop them," Sarah said. "Yes," Dr. Vasquez agreed. "But first we have to save Tau Ceti Prime. The cure we've developed can be modified to protect against the enhanced plague as well. If we can distribute it in time, we can turn their weapon against them." As they prepared to transfer the quantum storage matrices to the Defiance, Sarah realized that their mission had just become infinitely more important. They weren't just carrying medical supplies anymore. They were carrying the future of all organic life in the galaxy. Back on the ship, Emma was waiting with barely contained excitement. "Did you find survivors?" "Something even better," Sarah replied. "We found hope." As the Defiance resumed course for Tau Ceti Prime, now carrying the preserved minds of humanity's greatest scientists, Sarah felt a familiar determination settling over her. The odds against them were astronomical, but that had never stopped her before. Besides, she had learned something important during their time together. When humans faced impossible odds, they didn't surrender. They found a way to make the impossible possible. And with Emma's innocent faith, Marcus's technical genius, Prism's alien wisdom, and Dr. Vasquez's scientific brilliance all working together, Sarah was beginning to believe that even the hegemony's ultimate weapon could be defeated. After all, they had already proven that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't advanced technology or superior firepower. It was the simple human capacity to care for one another. even in the face of overwhelming darkness. Emma looked up from her tea party and smiled at Sarah with absolute trust. "Are we going to save everyone?" "Yes, Emma," Sarah replied with quiet conviction. "We're going to save everyone." And for the first time since the war began, she truly believed it was possible.